Hi everyone, can you hear me well? I can hear myself. Wow, it's so nice to be in such a fancy stage actually here. Wonderful. So I'll be talking about startup death zones or startups at the breaking points. And today, first of all, I would like to start out talking through the standard business process. So as a startup, you usually start out at a very early stage where you are searching for your product market fit and searching for a repeatable and scalable business model. The next stage where you go, it's called build stage, where you grow your revenues, you grow your user and customer base. And then you move into the growth stage, which is mainly about optimizing your business and reaching for liquidity. So talking about the Lithuanian examples, majority of your startups probably are at the first stage. Vinted would have reached already like build stage a year ago and moving further on right now. And we have several startups that are at the growth phase. And there you are at the crossroads. So you can either go into the renew and innovation side and potentially expand your portfolio of the products, or you can decline and go to a death zone. So an example again from Lithuania, Tesonet, for example, they have already expanded their portfolio and the number of the products that they work with by innovating and expanding widely. What is interesting and scary at the same time is that you can reach the decline or go to the death zone at any point of the business. Luckily, you can forecast and predict this and get ready early in advance. So let's look right now a little bit deeper into these breaking points, into these death zones, so you get ready and prepare well in advance. There are several ways and several angles to look into these breaking points and death zones. One of them is to look through the organizational scaling. It's very obvious, very clear one. So if your startup grows at certain points of time, at certain sizes, you will meet the threshold and the breaking point. If you decrease, it's going to be the same. The next angle is actually decentralization. If you are planning to establish remote country offices or remote city offices, that's going to be a breaking point. If you are planning to centralize your functions into one location, again, a breaking point to look at and to get prepared for. Cultural change is one more angle on how you could look into the breaking points. So mergers and acquisitions is quite a clear cultural change. Majority of these cultural changes are being driven by the direct business change. Less obvious, but very important for all of us here, is actually when the founders decide to take some pina coladas and go under the palm tree and invite new management team. This is a severe cultural change which might potentially lead to a breaking point. So now let's deep dive a little bit into the most obvious one, the one that is related to the growth of your team, the growth of your startup. So if you're a small startup, we call it like up to 25 people, you usually work as a small family, sit against the same table, know each other inside out, you share the same values. It's very easy to agree about anything. It's relatively easy to make decisions together. However, as the team grows and expands, things become much more complicated, and this is one of the breaking points. To be very accurate, the first step is so-called a startup death zone. The reason behind it being that a number of successful startups worldwide, even the ones that managed to reach product market fit, the ones that have raised big investments, they still fail and die at this phase because of team issues. Team issues is the third biggest major reason of startup death after inability to find product market fit and running out of money. And 23% of startups die because of team issues. It's pretty much every fourth to every fifth startup. That's a lot. So the next stage is actually when you look. So if you are 25 or above, and if you are a really skilled manager, a serial entrepreneur, it's most likely that you would not reach very severe breaking point or death zone up until maybe even 40 or 50 employees. However, if you are the first-time founder, it may be that you will meet severe challenges already at 10 to 15 people. So you need to think about how you prepare for it and what you have to do during this stage to get ready to the next round. If we move further on, if you are 50 to 300 employees, like a decent grown-up startup, I would call it like that, in most cases, you already have some level of structure, some level of processes, and decent management, mid-management team that helps you. However, the biggest problem at that phase is actually on how you communicate and how do you make sure that your people and your teams are aligned and how you do drive the energy towards one and the same goal. Talking about even bigger companies, companies above 300 people, I call them corporates without benefits. The reason behind it is because you no longer know people, you no longer know your peers and colleagues, so it feels like corporate. But this size of a company still usually doesn't have any processes or best practices like proper, decent, clear and processes established and embedded into everything on how you work. And then if we move further on, above 1,000 people and going beyond that, several hundred thousand, it's already huge corporates, which biggest issue is usually how to change, how to innovate, and these are the ones that are stuck in legacy. So when you think about it, across each of these stages and breaking points of a growing startups, change resistance and people issues manifest across all the spectrum, starting with tiny, even startups of 10, 15 people, ending up with huge corporates. And I would like to share several examples and start, interestingly enough, with the big corporates first of all. Bear with me, I will take you to the startup world, but first of all, let's look into the corporates. So case number one. In 2011, I started working at Barclays Bank Technology Center, a huge corporate, and back in the days, everyone was talking about Office 365 and cloud technologies for banking. I left Barclays in 2017, and Barclays just started migration to Office 365 that year. So it took 6 years for the innovation even to start the first steps. It took 6 years to even agree about the change. And it's quite a common story in such corporate. Many of us have heard similar kinds of stories. But why is it happening? What is the problem behind it? In many cases, big changes require everyone and everything to be renewed and changed. So you have to review how the management works, whether the management team is suitable and ready to head off with a change. You have to review how people are working. Every process, every system, everything has to be reviewed and changed if required. Now, the problem in many cases is that managers quite often initiate the change, but they do not evaluate their own resistance level towards the change. They're not ready to change themselves. They're not ready to replace themselves if required. And this becomes the biggest bottleneck for any kind of change. And you can adapt that for the startup world as well. Another example of a corporate is about merging the cultures. Again, in 2005, Barclays Bank has acquired the second biggest bank group in Africa continent. It's called ABSA Group. It was a very promising deal, emerging market, huge deal, everything is growing. In 2011, Barclays started merging those two big groups of the bank in Africa continent. And what actually happened is that after merging it for 5 years, in 2016, Barclays decided to pull out and sell everything in small parts in the whole continent. And this decision was made despite that Barclays Group, together with ABSA, was the best performing bank in the whole region. So why is that? Why such seemingly stupid decision was being made? Well, one of the reasons is actually that cultural merge properly didn't happen. It wasn't that the ones who were making the change didn't plan and prepare for the cultural merge, but it was the problem on how it was implemented. So Barclays has sent a number of managers to South Africa Republic. Majority of them were from UK to teach how to work and to integrate into the systems. And you can imagine what it actually means. The headquarters were in South Africa Republic, in post-apartheid South Africa Republic, where white managers come in to teach local people how to live and work. They actually knew what it meant. So technically, what happened, some of the managers were physically kicked out of the office, the others were simply ignored. And therefore, after 5 years of trying to merge systems, processes, cultures, and everything, after huge investment, Barclays decided to pull out and sell everything out. So it's all about the culture, which cannot be imported. It's about the culture that needs to be authentically created in every and each situation. Now let's jump a little bit towards the small startups, the kind of startups that we are. And I would like to share another example now from a rapidly growing startup. In 2009, I joined a company called Adform, and it was 30 people in Lithuania back in the days. Do we have any Adform people here? Whoa, hands, nice. So back in the days, Adform had already found a product market fit, had decent revenues from home markets in Scandinavia, and had just closed an investment round from the venture capital fund. So what was happening, we had enough money to scale and grow the team really rapidly. It was relatively small, and then since it grew from 25 and above people, it soon became clear that do it what it takes culture no longer works. And you have to establish certain level of structure and certain level of systems. Now people, an early team who are working there, were really happy to be part of the scaling and growing organization. However, they were resisting any kind of processes or even management layer occurrence. The reason behind it was that they felt that if any processes are created at least a small level, it would become a corporate company. So they didn't want this to happen. Everyone was resisting. So what is interesting about it, that a startup can resist a change even in the same way as the corporates do. The difference is just the scale and the impact of it. Well, ultimately what happened in Adform, the core team, the early team was onboarded, everyone kind of agreed that we need a certain level, and people, and even the early team played a key role in defining a certain level of structures and helping Adform to prepare for the next level. That was really a successful story. So what traditionally happens in that kind of startup and that kind of stage, we could try to deconstruct a little bit what is the founder reality and what is the employee reality. So at that stage, when you are an early stage startup, 10, 20, 25 people, you probably have just closed your investment round and you are about to grow. The founder reality, first of all, is, and many of us know it here, that you need to close this round. You need to get money, and your whole focus is money. You kind of expect, you can expect your team to wait until the round is closed, and you expect to come back and pay more attention for your people. However, the round is closed, and this doesn't happen, because then you need to increase your traction numbers. Then you need to increase your user base. Then you need to focus on your customers and prove your new investment board that you are able to deliver. Once this one is finished, you focus on revenues. And your people are being forgotten all the time. There simply isn't enough time for the people, for clearly defining roles and responsibilities, for even communicating what's the next step and what's direction, especially if the direction is changing rapidly, right? So what is the people perspective? Why did it happen in Adform at that point of time? So looking from the employee perspective, people don't feel that organization is flat anymore, which means that they feel that their opinions are not heard or the voices are not valued like it used to be previously. Early employees work alongside and together with newbies who have just recently joined, and the roles that were previously very unique, challenging, and exciting are being systemized and simplified in order to make them more simple, repeatable, and faster. The employees that they work together, the newbies, they get the same salary, they're being treated in the same absolutely way. If you're an early team member, it's most likely that you worked at the early stages of the startup 16 hours a day and have put all your effort to make this startup successful. However, now new people join and you work alongside with them and they treat it like, it's just a job, 9 to 5, not a mission, it's just a job. And this is where the morale drops out. What is happening in many cases is that these early stage people of yours, your teammates, they would approach a founder and try to share their feelings, their opinions, their positions, their perspectives. However, the founders are always busy. They're busy with traction, new users, revenues, and so on. But what actually happens is that if you decline to see and hear your teammates' perspective at least once, you will break the feedback loop and you will lose the opportunity to hear insights, to find out what is happening and why. So looking into all these three examples, startups actually make the same mistakes as big corporates. Startups often laugh out of the corporate mistakes and inability to innovate. But actually, this is just a different scale. The nature of the mistakes is very similar. It just looks ridiculous when the scale is huge. So if we overview and kind of come up with the scenarios on what we need to look at being a startup founder or a startup early team member, especially if you're a startup founder, you can come up with a couple scenarios. One of the scenarios is that your business grows, new people join, old people grow in their roles, however, you remain the same. What it actually means is you can become the biggest bottleneck of your startup success as a founder. You need to change and grow together with your startup. You need to make sure that you onboard people, that you trust people, that you allow them to make decisions, that you allow them to make mistakes as you will be handing over your responsibilities and work. It's no longer possible to run alone with everything, and we all know this. So you need to focus that you're able to do that. Another one is another scenario is that you build your company culture according to your own personality, which means that you end up hiring your own clones. So in many cases, startup founders actually don't build the culture at all. The culture just happens. And in best case scenario, it is the culture that is really homogeneous, a culture of very similar people without diverse attitudes and diverse opinions. Now, in the worst case scenario, you might end up with a culture where you would see manifesting bad habits, bad moral, and cynicism. So to summarize everything that we were talking about, there are several founder lessons that can be learned, so you wouldn't be the biggest bottleneck of your own success. So grow up with your startup, get ready to hand over decision-making for your new managers, and trust them. Don't breathe into their necks. Allow them to make your startup successful, and be ready even to move away in case you need additional skills. Be ready to step down and allow another manager to take over should you lack skills for the next level of your late-stage startup. Build the culture, not import it. Spend time for building that culture and defining the values early in advance, because it may become your competitive edge, where your culture is your biggest foundation for your growing startup. Find time for people. Set up the one-to-one culture, where it wouldn't be necessarily only you making these one-to-ones, but coach your management team so these one-to-ones would be happening regularly and both ways feedback would be circulating in the company. And definitely communicating more. What it means, actually, is that you need to over-communicate. Communicate your strategic direction, even if it will change tomorrow. So with this, thank you very much for your time. I wish to see a lot of successful and growing startups within the next year, and good luck.